You're listening to Conversations with Chanda, a Minneapolis Foundation podcast that unpacks the community's grittiest, most vexing problems, hosted by Chanda Smith Baker. I am so honored to introduce to you two amazing business leaders, Piyumi Samaratunga and Hubert Joly. Hubert is a former CEO and chairman of Best Buy, Harvard Business School professor, and author of The Heart of Business. And Piyumi is a partner at the law firm Constangy. And here's a fun fact. Piyumi had to go to law school for a third time after she learned her legal credentials in Sri Lanka and Cambridge University in England were not transferable to Minnesota. And now, Piyumi is widely sought by corporate clients and top employment immigration law firms alike. In this episode, Chanda connected with these two business leaders to talk about the importance of diverse and inclusive teams, the dangers of tokenism, and the power of leading with purpose. Enjoy the show.
I'm so happy to have you, Piyumi, and you, Hubert, on the Conversations with Chanda podcast that we offer here at the Minneapolis Foundation. So welcome. So glad to have you both. As we jump in, I'm just going to start with you, Piyumi, and ask if you wouldn't mind just providing an introduction to yourself, what you want the audience to know about you, and then Hubert will follow up with you.
Thank you, Chanda and Hubert, for this amazing opportunity. Delighted, as always, to be in a conversation with both of you, incredible thought leaders in this and larger spaces. First and foremost, I think of myself as a mother of three wonderful kids, a wife, and a daughter, and an immigrant to this country who believes in what this amazing country has to offer. But like in everything in life, perfection is a journey and not a destination. That is what I hope we will get to talk about today in terms of diversity and inclusion. My day job, as it were, is being an attorney running the Minneapolis office for a national law firm that really at its core and its founding DNA has diversity and inclusion etched into it. 75 years ago, we were founded in the Deep South by three founding members, one of whom was a woman. The notion of a woman simply being an attorney in an Atlanta-based organization 75 years ago would have been an accomplishment. But in addition to be a woman who was a founding member, goes to show our kind of commitment, founding commitment to diversity and inclusion. We are also the only law firm on a national landscape that has a named partner who's a minority.
Thank you so much, Piyumi. And Hubert.
Well, Chanda and Piyumi, what a delight. I so look forward to our conversation and eager to have this dialogue. In terms of an introduction, I am a grandfather of three amazing young granddaughters, ages 1 to 1 year old to 2.5 year old, which of course gives me a sense of responsibility for the future, right? What kind of world are we going to leave for these amazing granddaughters? I have been in business in my entire life, but my journey has been one of the transformation from somebody who grew up as a hard-charging, deeply analytical, performance-oriented McKinsey consultant to somebody who believes now in human magic. And I can say I didn't smoke anything illegal along the way. I've had the privilege of spending a dozen amazing years in the Twin Cities, leading two great Minnesota companies, Calcium companies, and then being part of the delightfully surprising resurgence of Best Buy. I've now studied a next chapter in my life. I really focused on adding my voice and my energy to what I believe is the urgent and necessary refoundation of business and capitalism around purpose and humanity, with a sense that in this world we need to make a declaration of interdependence. Business can be a force for good, and business cannot succeed in isolation, right? We're part of a community when, after the murder of George Floyd, when if the community is on fire, you cannot open the stores. It's as simple as this, right? You cannot run a business. And similarly, if the planet is on fire, you don't have a business. And so we need to make this declaration of interdependence and act for this free foundation. So do I do it? I do a number of things these days. I wrote a book. I published a book this year, The Heart of Business, which I'm very excited about. I'm now teaching at Harvard Business School, both in the MBA program and in executive education, with a focus on helping leaders put purpose to work and unleash human magic. And then with my amazing wife, Hortense Legentil, I coach and mentor a number of CEOs and executives. So it's really, trying to find meaning and provide impact and joy in this next chapter of my life.
Man, fantastic. There's so much goodness just in the introduction. And, I'm thinking about how Piyumi sort of talked about the law firm, right? Founded by women, yet the only one right now that has a named minority. How did you say, Piyumi?
A named partner. So
a named partner, right? So I met Don. He's amazing. And so here it was founded by a woman, and now it remains the only one with the person of color, with the minority name. It feels like we started out strong and then somehow didn't do a lot somewhere in the middle. Piyumi, how do you reconcile like those two things? Or what do you want people to understand about the importance of having him be the named partner? Is there any level of concern that we don't have more? Like, how do you reconcile those two things?
Absolutely. And Hubert is, exhibit A for a spokesperson for this cause, if for lack of a better term, right? I think the three of us have talked about the pyramid model. We've done amazingly well at the bottom layer of the pyramid in terms of opening the floodgates, as it were, to women and minorities. So 20 or almost 30 years after we have seen a critical mass of women going into the professions, law schools, medical schools, accounting profession, we've got built up an amazing pipeline of entry-level to middle-level managers. It is the C-suites, it is the decision-making places at the top of the pyramid, as it were, that we need to now focus on. And Hubert is an amazing spokesperson, having done this himself and seeing the value of it, right? We've got to have a bottom-up and a top-down model, what we call the sandwich model, right? And hopefully you will meet somewhere in the middle. There is a place for everyone. We've talked about this before. The inclusion of one group is never to the exclusion of the other. When I advocate for my two daughters to be able to do everything, or anything they set their mind to, if that comes at the cost of my son being able to do that, all we've done is swapped one group for another, right? And I think Hubert makes the perfect case in point that there is a place for everyone, but that simply making the pie bigger makes us stronger, not weaker. Same with law firms, right? Having a named partner who is a minority, in our case, Don Prophet, didn't eliminate the role for white men or women. So, we are better and stronger together, something I know, Hubert, you and Chanda, you have been great advocates for.
And Hubert, as you're listening, I want to hear more about how you've been great on this issue. I know you have been, but I would love for our listeners to hear that. And then you talk about your granddaughters and making the world better for them. And I think you mean that literally in terms of climate, but I imagine you also mean it in terms of if they want a seat on a corporate board, they would be valued the same way, considered the same way. Their expertise would be seen as equal to everyone else around the table. Can you offer anything more around this topic? Or I'd love to hear what you have to say.
No, of course, and both of you are very kind. It's not about me being great or not, because that's a narrow focus, but it's about the topic. And I think we have to say it out loud. Diversity is a business imperative. Mm-hmm. How stupid would it be for companies to just recruit from 1/4 of the population people who look like me? That'd be crazy. Businesses need to represent the customers they serve and the communities that they operate in. It's as simple as this. If you don't, then you're going to miss. And it's the business consequences are enormous. Let's take a couple of very concrete examples that Melody Hobson, the fabulous CEO of AO Investment and the chairman of Starbucks now as well. She told me, and I didn't know this, right? If you go to the restroom in a hotel, there's an infrared activated soap dispenser in the bathroom. Well, infrared technology, I had this confirmed by the top engineers at Intel, doesn't do a good job of detecting black as a color. So if you go into the bathroom and you have very dark skin, chances are you're not going to be able to get soap. Now, if in the hotel company or in the engineering company, there's no black leader, black engineer, there's nobody black, you're going to miss. And imagine the consequences of that. Similarly, on smartphones, cameras tended to be infrared activated, which led to well-known issues with the difficulty that was a few years ago of these smart cameras to take good pictures of black individuals. If you don't have any black engineers, again, or people on your team, you're simply going to miss. And more broadly, back to this idea, right? If the community is on fire, you cannot operate a business. So there's a business imperative to address diversity and inclusion, and not only in negative ways, in positive ways. We know from experience that diverse teams where everybody feels that they belong and that they can be the biggest, best, most beautiful version of themselves are more effective. And I believe, for example, that if it had been Lehman Brothers and Sisters as opposed to Lehman Brothers, it would not have been the catastrophe that we've seen. And to your point, Piyumi, it's one of the things I learned from Melody again. She told me you cannot be who you cannot see. And so she highlighted the importance of making change visible at the top. And in many ways, changing the top is actually easy, right? If you think about a board, that's 10 people. How hard can it be to recruit 5 amazing directors who are women? How hard can it be to recruit, 2 or 3, let's say, amazing directors who are people of color? That's the easiest thing in the world, if you really set your eyes to it. But we know also that what's the definition of madness, right? Doing the same thing and hoping for a different outcome. So we've learned a great deal in the last, couple of years, I would say. We know that having diverse slates and diverse interview teams leads to a more diverse outcome. Now, in the case of our board at Best Buy, we were very clear with the headhunters, Hedrick and Struggle. We told them, look, don't bother giving us resumes of non-Black candidates because we're at a stage where we want to really move the needle on that. And if you believe that you are going to be unable to identify, high-quality Black candidates for our board, we'll accept that. It's okay. We'll have no problem with that. Except we'll work with another firm. And of course, they, working together, we found 3 amazing Black directors who've added enormous value. And when I stepped down from the board in June of 2020, we had a majority of women on the board and we had 3 Black directors. And so that can be done. I think it starts from not only realizing that this is a business matter, it also starts in the heart. I have to say that, and I know that many leaders now have gone through this journey, right? For me, it was in 2016, I believe, when I realized that the level of engagement at Best Buy, while it was going up altogether, there was significant variation across race and ethnicity. So, I did what, a good leader would do, which is I did focus groups with, in particular, Black employees. And I got a punch in the stomach based on what I heard. I was shocked. I did not grow up in this country. Grew up in France. Now, believe me, in France, there's racism, plenty. But frankly, I had much to learn. And what I learned about the experience of our Black colleagues was devastating. And our diversity team was kind enough to then give me a mentor. They call it a reverse mentor. I don't know that, scratch the reverse, right? She was my mentor, Laura Gladney, amazing young mother, Black African-American woman from the Rondo community here in the Twin Cities. And I learned so much from Laura. And so the combination of the brain and the heart and the guts gave me the gut level courage to say that we have to change this. And I believe today that this generation has the ability, if we stay with it, to change the outcome and end systemic racism in corporate America. It has to be done, and I think we're on our way to do it, but we have to stay with it.
Mm-hmm. You talked about it would be essentially stupid to only run a business with 25% of the population, yet it still is happening on a fairly regular basis. And so I would like to believe that other people see it as important. But I think part of the challenge and the tension right now is that many don't. Well, or they aspire, but they don't. Like there's, you talk about continent dissidence in your book, the difference between sort of what they desire and what actually is happening. So what's at play here?
Yes. So I think, Chanda, that I'm not wrong in observing a sea change in the last couple of years, in particular following the murder of George Floyd. I think that that's what happened on that day, what we all saw was a game changer. And I see it. And that led so many individuals and leaders to deeply realize that, we had something deeply flawed here. And a lot of leaders, I give credit to Brian Cornell, for example, who eloquently tells the story, took the time to personally and deeply understand what's been going on. And now what's happening, I don't know every company in America, right? But I sit on a few boards and I'm involved on these issues. What you've seen is a big change. What do I mean by this? You have now companies setting quantitative targets that are time-bound. And you have boards holding management teams accountable. And you have management teams genuinely now saying, no, we're going to fix this. And there's a wonderful thing in this business world, which is once we've decided that something was a priority, was a business priority, we know how to solve these things, right? I mean, nobody's perfect in the business world, but once we've decided that, let's say we're going to attack the Chinese market or that we're going to develop at Best Buy an online business, we know how to get this done. And in a sense, once you've decided this in a company, and I'm focusing on Black diversity because I think we have to focus on that because it's been the most horrendous. It's a marketing problem. What do I mean by this? It's about how do you recruit, how do you retain, and how do you develop Black employees, managers, and leaders? Well, that's a marketing problem because it's similar to attracting, retaining, and developing customers. And so once you attack this as a marketing problem, you look at, am I targeting the right pawns to attract the targets, individuals I'm trying to recruit? What are the friction points? If I'm not retaining the employees, why is that? You analyze it and you problem solve. And then you hold leaders accountable. And so increasingly at companies, performance on the diversity dimension is part of the assessment of leaders. It's part of the increasingly compensation of leaders. It's part of the business reviews. So I see really a material change in attitude on that front. And that doesn't mean we're done. We're not. That doesn't mean we can let go. But I based on what I'm seeing, I see the progress year over year now at individual companies. If we stay with it, and that's a big thing to underscore, I think that we can make a huge difference. And the one thing I would highlight when I hear, conversations in the boardroom is that the competition for Black talent is extraordinary now, and so that's a good sign. But it's not just about just competing for the existing talent. I also see initiatives, focused on how do we grow the talent and so on and so forth. So I see a material change, Chanda.
Mm-hmm. Piyumi, do you see the same sort of material change, the sea change, particularly following George Floyd's murder?
I think there is a sea change in terms of the desire and the intention. And so as Hubert mentioned, I think we have to keep the pressure on and shareholder pressure in addition, right? And the customer demands, like both of you referred to, hiring just from 1/4 of the pool of candidates doesn't make sense. We as a nation form less than 5% of the global population. So even as a corporate strategy, when 95% or more of your potential customer base may or may not look like you and lives outside your borders, you need to begin to reflect, look, and sound both like your customers and clients by, retaining and attracting from diverse pools. So long-winded answer, Chanda, to say, the change that we would absolutely like to see on this side of the fence, as it were, hasn't quite happened, but I think there has been a sea change in the sense of urgency and intentionality. I think we got this conceptually for now a couple of decades. We understood the need for diversity and inclusion, but there was still not enough tension, as it were, to make this a business imperative. And now it is.
And what is interesting to see is that, in the last 2 decades, we've had shareholder activism. I think what's helpful to the cause now, in a way, is that we have stakeholder activism. Employees, customers, community, shareholders are demanding more, right? And you see many examples at companies that are either coming from their employees or their customers or the community or their shareholders being put under pressure, if they don't behave on either these societal issues, racial issues, environmental issues. And so as leaders, companies have a choice. They can either be on the back foot or they can be on the front foot. And that doesn't mean that, sometimes there's excessive actions, like, there's a debate these days about, the New York Times is writing about, should McKinsey and Company, for example, continue to serve high emission companies? And McKinsey's response is, well, if we want to, lower the carbon emissions in the world, we have to work where the carbon emissions are, right? So you cannot just abandon ship. So sometimes there is some nuances, but this notion of stakeholder activism is absolutely real. And by the way, the next generation is a different mix. My good friend Manita from Manita's Table, when she does her gathering, she does this exercise, right, in a big room. She asks the members of a gathering to go to 4 corners of the room based on the generation they're from. So we'll have the boomers, the generation X, and then generation Y, and then Z and A, and so forth. And then she says, look at the color diversity in the 4 corners of the room. Well, in my corner, which is the boomers, not that much. But in the Gen Z, oh my God, it's majority. And so, it's inescapable. And that would be another reason to believe that how stupid would it be to just recruit from 1 quarter of the population? It's 1 quarter on average, but if you look at the next generation, it'd be stupid to the power of 2.
And we do need a critical mass, right? tokenism just doesn't do what we need to be done desperately. Just having one person or two doesn't add the power of a voice, right? The three of us are case in point. We've seen how our debates and discussions have changed significantly on the board that we serve together, now that we have more than just one or two people of color, minorities. And so, the famous saying, one is a token, two is a presence, three or more is a voice. And we need those voices, again, to ensure the success and continuity of business success. Because we bring in different experiences, whether it's in innovation. Talk to some of the largest, most successful healthcare centers in this country, whether it is Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic or Johns Hopkins. Most of the departments, their top physicians come from all over the world. They're not recruiting from one homogeneous group. And there is a reason for it, because that diversity enhances the delivery of whatever it is, whether it is a professional service or a widget that we are producing.
And Piyumi, in your role, right, leading a professional service firm or with a prominent law firms, you see a lot of companies, right? That's by definition. If you had to analyze what differentiates the companies that you serve, that you see, that are really leaning forward on the diversity and making great progress and are achieving, what differentiates them from the laggards and getting to, what are some of the key leverage points? What have you observed?
That, we are able to deliver more effective, customer-focused, or in our case, client-focused, solutions when we have a diverse group of people, seemingly similar, because we are all, lawyers and have gone through the same rigmarole of years of law school training. But we bring our experiences and background, no matter how much we try to kind of say we are putting our lawyer hat on, you do bring your experience. And so how we even conceptualize, how we, peel a problem apart and come at it when there are different, mindsets at the table is so different. And so again, back to the tokenism, gone are the days when you can have a token minority person for your pitches, just joining you and then never participating in the outcome, the long-term outcome, because you see the difference in the quality of the product. And when you can relate, when your lawyers, your legal teams can represent your client and your client's customer base, there is automatic, trust built much faster.
Yeah, and I imagine that companies and places that are really understanding the value of diversity are also retaining diverse leadership at a different rate than those that are hiring for diversity. I imagine that there is consistency, that there are measurements, that there's expectations, as you shared out, Hubert, that are built into performance measures so that there's an alignment. And so you mentioned Melody Hobson. I had the opportunity to talk to John Rogers on this podcast. And so one of those measures for me would also be what he shared and what the University of Chicago is doing around moving from supplier diversity to business diversity. I think it's the alignment of decisions on where investments are made, who are you hiring for your business services, down to who's reflective in your boardroom and your leadership. And as Piyumi mentioned, it's the pyramid meeting itself. And there's an intention at every level. And I see that as a difference maker. And you feel it when you walk into businesses that have this aligned commitment. Are there other measures and things that we should be looking at or aspiring to, Hubert, to really show the commitment And as Piyumi said, like organizations, businesses that are moving beyond tokenism, what does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, in terms of targets, what I see is companies setting targets for themselves in terms of the mix of talent at the leadership level and setting targets to be achieved over time. Then, to break it down, you have to look at a driver of this, which is diversity of slates and diversity of interview teams as a key driver of that outcome. I love John Rogers' points because it's about diversity. It's also about economic opportunity. And so business, can be a force for good and can make a difference in creating business opportunities for, in particular, the Black African community or women. And so companies that lean in on how they manage their supplier base, and to John's point, not just the janitorial services, to be blunt, right? But how, the Coca-Cola company had its general counsel share with the law firms that they were working with that, they had a target. Similarly, when I was at Best Buy at an event, I told, the community of marketing vendors that if they were not evolving the diversity of their teams, potentially they could save on gasoline. They would no longer need to travel from, Minneapolis to Richfield. And so, again, companies can be a force for good, but again, it goes back to this idea. These are business problems, and we know how to solve business problems.
Ube, Chanda, if I may, I have a question for you, Hubert. Often, at least in the professional services space, something we come across is where larger clients will say, yes, we would like to hire diverse law firms, diverse vendors, but we don't have the scale needed in diverse, vendors or professional services pools that we are looking at, because they still tend to be smaller. How do you address that? For me, it is a catch-22, right? I mean, none of these larger firms, whether it is, or in the, service industry, started out being giants or global behemoths. They started somewhere, but someone or many people had enough faith and trust or commitment to keep giving them enough work until they grow big enough. So how do you address that?
So, one of the things I've seen a CEO do was sit down with the CEO of one of their large IT vendors and say, let's work together so that over time, the teams that this IT vendor was going to field at that company were going to be more diverse. Because it's one of these things where it's like the carbon footprint. If I'm running a company and you ask me tomorrow, you need to be carbon neutral, I don't know how to do this. When I was at McKinsey, we used to say it takes 12 years to develop a partner, a senior partner. You just can't shrink it. It's like the famous saying about if you take 9 women, it still takes 9 months, for a child to be born. And so I think it's the idea of sitting down between the company and its key vendors and really developing a plan on how to do this, being clear about expectations, and then looking at how firms react. I know that, I've seen on boards where it would be a professional firm pitching with a non-diverse team, and you just tell them, look, we're not going to work with you if you have a non-diverse team. So that's working with large established players. And then I think on the other side, you're talking also about how do we have smaller firms that are from the get-go, more diverse. I think the implication would be let's so have this concept of putting the thumb on the scale, right? Again, because what's the definition of madness? Doing the same thing and hoping for a different outcome. And maybe I'll tell a story about gender diversity. Less related to suppliers, but more to succession planning and development. According to Sally Helgeson, who's written this great book, How Women Rise, according to her research, if a boy is 80% ready for a promotion, most of us will say, "Oh, we got it, we're ready," right? And she's observed that if a woman is 125% ready for a promotion, most of the time, women will say, "I've not finished what I was doing here. I'm not sure I'm ready. I'm not sure I want the limelight. So thanks, but no thanks." So if we take this at face value, we'll always go with the boy and not the highly qualified woman, and we'll miss on the opportunity to have a better team. And so once you realize this, if it's true, then you have to have an exchange rate. If a boy is saying, "I got it," that means most of the time it's going to be 80% true. And if a woman is saying, "I'm not sure," then it's probably 125% ready. And so put the thumb on the scale, not take no for an answer, and then work, on adjusting for that. So as leaders, we have the opportunity to make a difference, but it requires putting our thumb on the scale.
That's a great point, Hubert. I mean, we see this at classroom level, right? Whether it is K through 12 or college and beyond, that the professor who actually calls out and draws out the quiet kid, whether it is a woman or a person of color who typically doesn't shoot their hand up, often is worth listening to when the professor draws them out, right? So it is not one person, it's not simply telling the immigrant kid or the kid of color or the woman, "Hey, you need to learn to speak up and do better in class participation." It's a two-way street. The professor needs to step up too.
It's such a great experience on exactly this point. So as you know, I'm teaching at Harvard Business School, and earlier this week, the student who has participated the least since the beginning, we had done an exercise, a simulation on optimizing performance of a company based on the case study at Harvard. The most silent student produced a better answer on the case. And if you never ask, so you have to find a way. Now, the world, there's this great book also called Quiet, right? That shows how the world is dominated by the extroverts. And so to your point, if we don't call on the introverts, we're going to miss. Their point of view is oftentimes going to be better than the extroverts. So again, it's putting our thumb on the scale.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling out us introverts. I appreciate that. And I think that what we're talking about a couple of things in here, and I want to just perhaps talk about something you said in the beginning, Hubert, which is around your evolution as a leader, because all of this has to be a commitment of a company that's expressed through the leader. And you shared that you're a very different leader now than you were when you were at McKinsey. What changed?
Oh, what changed? It's been a 30-year evolution. One was about 20 years ago. In many ways, I had been successful, right? I was at the top of my first mountain. I'd been a partner at McKinsey. I was on the executive team of a major multinational company called Vivendi Universal. I was successful, except I felt that it was empty. There was no meaning at the top of that first mountain. And that led me to step back, call it my midlife crisis, and reflect on the meaning of my life. What meaning do I want to find in my life? What's the purpose of my life? How do I want to be remembered? At HBS, in the new CEO workshop we do with our good friend Bill George, we ask the new CEOs to write their retirement speech. And my wife, Hortense Legentil, who is this amazing executive leadership coach, one of the things she does with her client is she asks them to write down their eulogy. How do you want to be remembered? And believe me, whether it's the retirement speech or eulogy, people don't write, I want to have made partner by the age of 30. I want to have, made so much money by the age of, no. I think at the heart of every one of us, there's a desire to do something good in the world. Even Darth Vader in Star Wars, his son believes, the Force is still within him. And so it's about defining our purpose, what kind of a leader we want to be. Now, to Piyumi's earlier points, there's a difference between desire and ability. So something that also helped me was when in 2009, I started to work with a coach. And before that, somebody had told me, Mary or Jack are working with a coach. I would have said, what's wrong with them? Who needs a coach, right? Why are we wasting companies' money to... then you realize, I've done an extensive survey, exactly 100% of the top 100 tennis players in the world have a coach. 100% of the NFL teams have a coach, NBA, MLB, you name it. Why would it be that as leaders, we would not need a coach? Now, the challenge I had in part was struggling to deal with feedback. And my coach, Marshall Goldsmith, the father of all executive coaches, helped me learn about feed forward. What do I want to get better at? It's not what I did last month. I cannot change what I did last month, right? But based on a 360 feedback, I can decide what I want to get better at. And so when I joined Best Buy in 2012, 3 months after I joined, told my team, let's agree that this turnaround is going to be hard, right? So the reason why we know it's going to be hard is that everybody thinks we're going to die, right? So that's how you know it's going to be hard. And so that means that every one of us on the executive team are going to need to be the best leader we can be. And that includes me. So I have a coach. He's going to come in. He's going to ask for your views on what I'm doing well and things I can do better. I got that feedback. Marshall told me, here's the scoop. You don't need to do anything. Right? There's no God that says, you need to do this. But he told me, what would you like to get better at? And then I went back to the team and said, thank you for everything you shared with Marshall. On this basis, 3 things I've decided to work on. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Right? And I'm going to follow up with each of you and ask you for advice on how I can get better at these things. And then I'm going to follow up in 3 or 4 months and ask you how I'm doing and, if you have further advice. And so that was transformative for me because who doesn't want to get better? And of course, Marshall in that context helped me understand that the role of the leader is not to be a superhero. It's not to tell everybody else what to do. It's much more to create an environment where you can unleash, the potential of everybody. It's not about being perfect. There's an entire chapter in The Heart of Business, right, in my book, around the quest for perfection is evil, right? And I think the model of leaders today is much more somebody who's authentic, who's vulnerable, who is humble, who has empathy, and realizes that we don't know and we need help, right? Did any one of the 2 of you have the manual to deal with the pandemic back in March 2020? Right? You did not, right? Otherwise, you would have shared it with the world. Same with back to the office. So we're in a world where on many of these issues is we don't know. And we have to figure it out as a team. And that's how we unleash human magic as opposed to the leader as the superhero. So that these were some aspects of my long journey to evolve.
Yeah, I love it. And Piyumi, I have some assumptions about how you maybe have changed over the course of your leadership, which I imagine includes you getting more bolder in the spaces as you have moved into your current role as partner. Can you share a little bit about your leadership transformation and perhaps even some of your best leadership advice you've received?
Absolutely. And for me too, similar to Hubert and you, Chanda, it's a journey, right? So I think my first pivotal moment came 25 years ago when I moved here, migrated here as a adult, and found that I was in a place and a space that was really very different to where I had been born and raised for 30 years of my life. And suddenly being put outside your zone of comfort, makes you grow in ways that at the moment you don't fully appreciate, but makes you realize that you've got to dig deep and find tools that you never thought you had. And so that was kind of one critical and pivotal moment for me. And then throughout the journey, again, talking about, need for a critical mass in any space that we are trying to expand and open out. For me too, initially it's the desire to blend in, right? Not rock the boat, so that you get a sense of, no matter how false it is, I belong. You don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. And then increasingly finding communities of similar voices like you, like Hubert, like our dear friend Val Jensen, who really kind of helped me, find that courage, really, for lack of a better term, that you've got to speak up. And that, again, if you are holding others accountable and pushing them against the difference between intention and implementation, you have to do it yourself as well. And so those have been my critical moments of learning. And again, Hubert referred to it, the George Floyd event, which kind of precipitated the need for those of us who have believed in this work to step up and speak up. But that doesn't come easily. It's not an overnight process. And I look at some of my younger partners and colleagues who are in that journey. And you have to get, I think, to a certain place of feeling secure enough and confident enough to really push the envelope and advocate for more radical change.
I like it. In the book, Hubert, you talk about a data breach story in the book. It turned out not to be a breach, but it was the holiday season. You thought there was, you gathered them, and you talked about I felt like you shared sort of your self-talk as you entered into the room in terms of how you were going to go in there. And what you said was, I need to be a thermostat rather than a thermometer. And I really appreciated that. And I think that even in this last conversation, it's how we show up as leaders, knowing what to employ when, and understanding the role in setting culture, building leadership, measuring what you want to be done, and ultimately understanding that business is so much more. Business has a purpose that extends beyond the profits. I wonder if you could share what you meant by be a thermostat.
Yes. So back to the question of the role of the leader, which is to create the right environment for others to be successful. If I'm a thermometer, that means that if things are not going well, oh my God, I'm going to be very cold, I'm going to maybe retrench. And if things are going well, I'm going to be very effusive and so forth. I just tend to amplify the movement. One of the things we have all realized, right, is that we need to make a difference between what we can control and what we cannot control. And what we cannot control influences the environment, but then it's all about what we do. And so if I'm a thermostat, it's the realization that, what happens sort of independent of what I can do. And it's all about what I'm going to do to help navigate these waters. And so that means that, and I learned this from my coach, every day, I'm trying to, show up as upbeat and positive, irrespective of the temperature outside, right? Because I know that my role as a leader is to create the energy within the organization. And it's not that I want to be insensitive to what's happening, but it's all about what are we going to do? And how do we show up to deal with this matter, whether it's good, bad, or indifference? And as a public company CEO, one of the things you notably, to illustrate your point, you try to avoid is overly react to what the share price is doing, right? And I learned that from my CFO, Sharon, who we recruited in 2012. She told everyone, because she had ample experience working in public companies, if the share price goes up, don't be too excited because if it's going to go down at some point, right? It fluctuates. So when it goes down, then you're going to be very depressed. No, just focus on what you're doing the right thing for the benefit of the company and all stakeholders. And then, the share price, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, but don't overreact.
And it's interesting, isn't it also, Hubert, especially for you from your vantage point now teaching at a premier business school, that is Harvard, to see how our own notions of leadership and what we value in leadership has changed over the decades. 30 plus years ago, it was all about IQ, right? Then we said, no, EQ matters. Yeah. And now we are at a point where vulnerability is a critical leadership trait, and authenticity is as well. So the leader is not expected to be this hard-charging, I know it all, let me tell you how to do. And some of the most effective leaders during points of crisis will show up and say, I don't know how we should react or what we should do or say, but let's figure it out together. So it is fascinating to see our own definitions also of leadership. Same with physicians. At one point, Atul Gawande's book, Being Mortal, is an absolute seminal book on that. We thought of physicians as warriors. They were battling disease or death, and they had to make it right. And sometimes it is acknowledging the inevitability of death. And then how do you kind of, blanket the family and the patient with warmth and care and concern, rather than let's battle this out with every procedure at our hands, right? So there is humility that is so necessary in being an authentic leader now.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about why you went to law school so many times.
Yes. So as you know, I migrated here 25 years ago. And at the time, Chanda, I had gone to law school in my home country, Sri Lanka. I was a fully fledged lawyer, having worked for a little over 5 years at the time, exclusively on international transactional law. And then while in my home country, I had also taken a sabbatical to go to Cambridge University in England, where I did my master's in law, again, focusing on corporate law. Due to family circumstances, specifically a terminal illness of my mother-in-law, we kind of moved here unexpectedly, as you know. And then when I came here, and again, family circumstances compelled us to stay longer, and that longer has turned into 25 years. So we never really intentionally decided to migrate. But at that point, I thought, I could practice law, and then found out in the United States, each state governs its own, has its own rules in terms of admission to the bar. And in Minnesota, which then happened to be one of the most restrictive, simply to be able to take the bar exam, I needed to have an American JD. So I couldn't even take a bar exam to get my license without an American JD, despite a law degree and a graduate law degree from Cambridge. England, Sri Lanka, and US are all three common law-based countries, so we had the same foundation. But I had to go back to law school all over again while working at a major Fortune 500 in town with a 3-year-old at home and pregnant with twins. So I did law school in 2 years, but that again, it is the power of family, friends, and community sometimes that keeps you going. I don't think I would have taken that journey on my own unless for the fact that I felt I couldn't let down all of those who thought I could do better.
Yeah. And Piyumi, how many people do you think choose differently than going back to school when they come to this country?
I think the greater majority. I can tell you from personal experience. I remember when I was at a different law firm and used a different parking ramp, the parking ramp attendant was a judge in his home country. and didn't have the means to go back to law school when he was here. He had gone to law school. He was a practicing judge with way more years of experience than I ever had cumulatively at that point. And he was a parking garage attendant at a downtown Minneapolis parking lot. I've talked to checkout counter clerks at grocery stores who have been practicing, lawyers. I remember distinctly once at a local hospital getting my blood drawn, and the technician who drew my blood was a surgeon who had practiced as a surgeon for 7 years in her home country before migrating. So the amount of talent that we don't fully leverage and tap into is just unbelievable. And again, it is about, unleashing human magic, finding ways in which we leverage talent wherever it exists, right? And you think of forget the immigrant community, even domestically, whether in the African American community or the Native American community, how many who are compelled to remain at home because access to childcare or elder care is not affordable. And then, those who are kind of responsible to provide the caregiving, who choose not to engage in a vocation or profession or a trade that they might be amazingly skilled at, or those who don't find the seed money to find that $5,000 you need to take your business to the next level, or your idea to a business plan even.
Yeah, and these are things that are barriers that there's actually solutions to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If you look at some of the micro-lending, I once had a client, she was the spouse of a client who had led one of the largest micro-lending banks in her home country, capitalized at a couple of million US dollars at the time, who was recognized both by the UN and EU for her incredible work in micro-lending to women in third world countries. Chanda, she had, there was something about her. She was sat silently. It was an immigration consultation that her husband came to meet me at. And there was something about her that once the consultation was done, I said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And she broke down asking if I could find her a bank teller or secretary job that she could not, that she was interviewing. And they would say she is overqualified, but nobody wanted to consider her for anything higher up. And imagine someone recognized who has addressed the UN and recognized by the UN and the EU for her expertise. In a climate like this, where we are reeling from the ramifications of the pandemic, with women and people of color at the hardest hit levels, why don't we leverage talent like that? So it is just unbelievable how much we don't tap into.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And speaking of talent and your move to the US, which I'm glad you did for my very selfish reasons, your children are amazing. I've met 2 of them, but I feel like I know them through our conversations. And your son has contributed to a book that I see behind you on the shelf. Can you just share a little bit about them quickly? And I'd love to just hear and hear a little bit more about this book, Preventable.
Absolutely. So my son is a first-year medical student at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. It was a long journey for him to get to medical school, and it was a lifelong dream. And what gives me most hope and joy is he says, "Mommy, I want to do real healing and primary care and open up a clinic in a place that one hasn't existed for 100 years. So he is not in this for the glamour of it. Medical school is anyway a long slog, but he is about how do we impact the most, and that clinical, acknowledging that clinical medicine only impacts 10% of the healthcare outcomes in this country. 90% is public policy around racial justice, access to food, good water, decent living, education, and the like. And it was, I think, a gift of a lifetime for him to have the opportunity to be a research assistant for Andy Slavitt, who wrote the book Preventable, and to have contributed to that effort. And he has been an amazing mentor to our son, Nath. And again, it is leaders like Andy and Hubert who are really impacting the next generation to focus more about what they can give. I think this generation has a propensity for that, but gives me hope. I think hopefully this next generation will do better than our own. My twin daughters, once at Barnard College in New York, hoping to go to law school, and she too is a huge fan of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and again wants to focus on public interest litigation, again representing those who need a voice and who have been not represented at all or underrepresented. And my other daughter, who's a senior at Trinity College in Connecticut, she started out in the art history space, which she is majoring in, but increasingly disillusioned by the very Western-centric focus on that and the lack of people of color and expertise and representation around, art is not simply a Western-centric notion. For thousands of years, there were other countries and spaces and people who produced amazing works of art that we are yet to fully recognize and focus on. So she is majoring also in international studies, the African diaspora and peace and conflict, specifically in Africa being a major interest area for her. So feel very blessed that our kids somehow didn't focus on Wall Street and making the most money they can, but more kind of in the public service. How do I have impact? And hopefully, for you and me as well, right? We leave wherever we have been better than when we arrived.
Mm-hmm. As we close, I wonder if you would be willing to share what you are most hopeful about at this time.
For me, it is, this is the moment. If not now, when? I think we've understood the concept and doctrine for the value of diversity and inclusion. We've known about the business case for diversity and inclusion. If we go to nature, we know the value purely as a species to exist in terms of the need to cross-pollinate, which is why we make it illegal to marry your own first cousin, because diversity strengthens everything, whether it is biodiversity or in the business case. So I think hopefully in the next few years, we will move beyond the theory and the understanding of the concept to actually making mass scale critical change needed.
Piyumi, that was beautiful. Two things make me hopeful. One is an increasingly widespread realization that what we have today is not working, right? And second, it's the heart and the soul of the next generation of leaders, whether it's the 20-year-olds, but also the 30, 40, 50-year-olds. There's a quality of leadership and a desire to create, as our good friend Richard Davis used to say, create a future that does not exist yet, but that can be better and needs to be better. And I think that if we work together, if we stay with this, we hopefully will create a better outcome. And we need to, because back to my granddaughters, if we continue the same trajectory, they're going to talk to me, in 10, 15, 20 years and say, they call me happy. How cool is that to be called happy?
I love it.
What did you do? Were you asleep at the wheel? And I would like to have a better conversation with them.
Hubert, you've mentioned your book. I've read it. It gave me more gifts than I imagined that I would receive. And I know the proceeds of the book go to support the Teen Tech Centers. And I've told you, I had the opportunity to bring a tech center from Best Buy to the Brian Coyle Center before I left Pillsbury United Communities as CEO, and a Hope Community where my sister leads has one. And I've seen them come up, very, very impactful. But can you share a little bit about the connection to the tech center with your book?
Yeah, Chanda, thank you for asking. I'm, of course, very excited about the book, The Heart of Business. In part, yes, because the proceeds, my proceeds from the book go to help fund the Best Buy Teen Tech Centers, which is a great initiative that was studied when I was CEO at Best Buy, which is focused on helping disadvantaged teenagers in underserved communities have access to technology skills, which are so important, right, to today and the future, and hopefully a path to a job and higher education. And the funding for the Teen Tech Centers has come from the Best Buy Foundation, some of Best Buy's partners, but increasingly also from individuals. And I'm very, very excited that that's one of my key priorities with my foundation, and the book proceeds to help fund that. So we have 50 of these Teen Tech Centers across the country at this point, on our way to 100. And I'm hoping that I'll contribute personally a few. The other thing that excites me about this book, The Heart of Business, right? It's a book that amplifies the idea that, yes, business can be a force for good, and that's the extreme pursuit of profit, has been poisonous, and that we can reinvent a view of business as a force for good in pursuit of a noble purpose, putting people at the center, embracing our stakeholders, and treating profit as an outcome, not the ultimate goal. Now, this is something, right, Chanda and Piyumi, that most people now believe in. And the challenge for many of us is not whether that's the right direction, but what does it mean in practice? How do you move in that direction? And so it's a book that I've written with the view to help those leaders, many leaders who are keen to move in that direction and need a bit of help. So it's really a handbook for these leaders, full of not only ideas, but very practical advice and very concrete examples. So my desire is that the book gets into as many hands as possible, and that it be a little bit helpful to those leaders who are eager to lead from a place of purpose and with humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the reflection questions at the end of the chapters are very helpful to allow you to just pause and take in what you've learned, but also to really think about what it means for you in your role. And leadership is so personal, and we all bring gifts to the places and spaces that we're in if we so choose. So thank you for that and the work that you're doing, and just shaping leadership and the future of where business could and should go. Piyumi, I'm wondering if there's anything that you didn't say. Do you want to announce when your book is coming out, or?
Not quite yet, but I've read almost every book written on diversity and inclusion, but Hubert, yours is a game changer because you give concrete examples of having implemented these strategies and the outcome which was successful. I love the term unleashing human magic from your book. And that's really what this is all about. And that profit is an outcome, not the sole goal. Just a wonderful book. I cannot recommend it enough. My chairman said he was so moved by it. He is making it required reading for our executive committee, but really a wonderful handbook for top leaders of corporations. Speaking for myself and our firm, again, look to firms that are not out there brandishing their awards in diversity and inclusion, but who believe in this and who have walked the walk for decades. And borrowing from Hubert's amazing suggestion, during our conversation, getting into conversations with your vendors who are not as big and out there as to how you can co-create a pipeline that meets your diversity and inclusion goals, but also enables the kind of scale you need. So thank you both very much for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. I love this conversation. I appreciate you both so much. And I look forward to interacting soon.
Of course, I look forward to that. Chanda, Piyumi, thank you so much.
Thank you, Hubert.
And that's Piyumi Samaratunga, Hubert Joly, and our host, Chanda Smith-Baker. The Heart of Business book can be found and purchased in your local and online stores. If you like this episode, have a suggestion, or have questions to ask for our upcoming new guests, please visit Chanda on Instagram at Chanda S. Baker. Thank you to Sarah Gillen, John Coco, Darlene Benjamin, and our host, Chanda Smith-Baker. This is Sue Pot Kienitz, and thanks for listening.